Hello, hello, everyone. Minasan konnichiwa. My name is Yoshi Domoto. I am the executive director of the Japan America Society of Georgia, and we warmly welcome you to today's program commemorating the 10th anniversary of the Great East Japan earthquake and tsunami 10 years ago on March 11th, 2011. Today's commemoration will feature Georgia's special connection to the Tohoku region in Japan, where the lives of so many people are still being impacted by one of the most destructive natural disasters in history. But without further ado, we'd like to start our program and introduce the Consul General of Japan in Atlanta, the Honorable Kazuyuki Takeuchi. Consul General?
Good afternoon. The Great East Japan earthquake. I still vividly remember the day and cannot believe already a decade has passed since then. First, please allow me to express my heartfelt condolence to those succumbed to the disaster. Today, we look back on the time with panelists and discuss the thoughts on the Great East Japan earthquake and our unshakable friendship between Georgia and Tohoku. We hope that we can further strengthen the ties between US and Japan through sister city exchanges. Actually, I lived in Miyagi, one of the hardest hit areas from 2014 to 2016, just a few years after the disaster, and be well aware how hard the region was hit and how precious were the helping hands extended from this great country of the United States. We are so grateful to Mayor Phil Best of Dublin, Jessica-san of YKK, Yokozawa-san of Delta Airlines, and Trevor-san of Global Atlanta for joining us today. In 1999, Osaki City, Miyagi Prefecture, and the city of Dublin, Georgia, signed a sister city relationship and have continued grassroots exchange since then. The opportunity to establish a sister city relations began with the construction of YKKAP factories in both cities. In 2019, Mayor Phil Best of Dublin visited Japan to participate in the Grassroots Exchange Network Japan program, known as GAINJ program, with Trevor of Global Atlanta. They visited the Tohoku region, including Osaki City and Ishinomaki City, and interacted with industrial and educational institutions. Delta Airlines has also contributed in extending various support and sending volunteers to the affected area. For example, the Japan-US Baseball Exchange Project, a baseball camp organized by former director Bobby Valentine in collaboration with Delta, the official airline company for the project. Yesterday, we successfully held a workshop on how to fold 1,000 paper cranes for Dublin high school students with the Dublin International Committee and JASG. A crane is considered as a symbol of longevity in Japan and said to live for 1,000 years. Prior to World War II, Senbazuru, 1,000 papercraft cranes, was dedicated to a shrine together with a most desired wish. In addition, it has become a symbol of peace derived from a story from Sadako Sasaki. Sadako folded paper cranes wishing for recovery from disease caused by the radiation from atomic bomb. Sometimes 1,000 cranes are given to an athletes or sports team for good luck and hopes for a victory. I wait for girls and boys to finish 1,000 paper cranes. On completion, we will immediately send them to Mayor Sato of Osaki City. The threat of natural disaster is always there, and we know that the Great East Japan earthquake is not over in any sense. I was back in Japan last month and experienced very big earthquake. Specialists concluded that it was one of the aftershocks from 10 years ago. Nature always tests us in how we prepare and respond. It does not only apply to earthquake, but to pandemic we are now experiencing. We must take every lesson we have seriously and make a better prepared society for next generation. I firmly believe various ties between two countries enable us to overcome the challenge. Thank you very much.
At this time, we'd like to proceed with our program and introduce the moderator of our event, the Vice Chair of the Japan American Society of Georgia and the Vice President of Community Engagement and Corporate Communications at YKK Corporation of America. Welcome, Ms. Jessica Court. Hello, Jessica-san. Yoroshiku onegaishimasu.
Hi. Thank you, Yoshi. And thank you so much to everyone for joining today's very important event. March 11th, I think, is a day that none of us will soon forget. I was actually working at the Consulate General of Japan in Atlanta on that day. And this was before I had a smartphone. So actually the first I heard about this was driving into work, and I heard about it on the radio. And I just remember driving and just being in first, complete disbelief about what was happening. And the first thing I wanted to do when I got into the office was, of course, take a look at the images and the video on the computer. But the second I walked into the office, my phone started ringing off the hook. And had very little information at the time, but I remember the first phone call we got from CNN, and then it was every other news network in the city wanting more information, wanting a statement from the Consul General. And so it was just, kind of trying to gather, just process what had happened. And that was immediately followed by a phone call from a frantic mother whose daughter was a JET program participant in Miyagi Prefecture, and she was missing. She couldn't get a hold of her. And, I was the JET program coordinator at the time, and I felt so responsible, to her. I'm a mother myself, and I could hear the panic in her voice. I mean, she was just absolutely frantic. And, she's yelling at me because I didn't have the answer. We had no idea where her daughter was. And thankfully, her daughter was safe, but it took us 3 days to track her down. Eventually, you have to understand that in the chaos, all the phone networks were down, the communications were down. She was fine, but she just was not able to get through. And the thing is, that story, has a good conclusion, but, the reality was that there were more than 15,000 people who did lose their lives on that day. And there were 2 American JET program participants as well. And I will definitely be, at the end of this program, happy to share one of the stories of one of those Americans who lost her life. But I think the goal for the discussion today is, 10 years out, is not only to remember, the sadness of that day and all of the terrible things that happened, but at the same time to celebrate the absolutely amazing progress that our friends in Japan have made in rebuilding their homes and their communities. I think it would be really hard pressed to find any people more resilient than the people of Japan. And I think there's really no better example than the aftermath of this tragedy. I actually had the opportunity to witness that firsthand in 2016 when I accompanied a delegation of students from Dublin to Osaki, and we had the opportunity to tour Ishinomaki. That was one of the areas that was hardest hit in 2011. It had already, 5 years had passed, And all of our media in the United States had moved on. You know, Japan really just was not being covered. And so I, for some reason, naively in my head, had the idea that the whole city had been rebuilt, when in fact, 5 years on, there were 20-foot tall mountains of debris, you know, still piled in the center of the downtown. It was just amazing. But at the same time, there were so many people that we had the opportunity to meet on that trip that were involved in incredible projects that were not just about rebuilding the city or rebuilding the infrastructure, but they were also restoring a sense of community to the region. And I think that was the most important takeaway today. And I think that all of our panelists that I have the opportunity now to introduce to you, I think they're really going to talk about those community ties and friendships that are so important, especially when a disaster like this strikes. So today, we have the pleasure of getting to speak with Phil Best, who is the mayor of the city of Dublin, Georgia. We have Akinori Yokosawa, who is the manager of the joint venture Asia market for Delta Airlines. And we have Trevor Williams, managing editor of Global Atlanta. So I'd first like to start off with Mayor Best. Can you please tell us a bit about the relationship between Dublin and Osaki?
Sure, I'll be glad to. Our relationship actually started soon, not too far after the YKK plant located here in Dublin. Mayor Sato and Mayor Bob Walker were the two mayors at the time. And in 1999, I believe it was, they created a sister city relationship. Since that time, there's been 175 exchanges done between the two cities. The number of students that were involved in that was about 152. The other attendees or exchange participants were educators or other VIPs. But so that tells you that it's been a strong relationship. I'll also say YKK, I've got to say that of all of our corporate citizens here in Dublin, Georgia, YKK is probably the closest to us as a true friendship and true relationship focused, and we always try to cover each other, whatever we need to do. We've had to call on each other at times. It's gone both ways, and you know, it's good to be a partner. It's easy to be a partner when things are going good, but when things aren't going quite so good, and you're still a good partner, that's a friendship. And we feel like YKK and our friends from Japan are truly good friends.
Thank you so much for those kind words, Mayor Best. And can you tell us a little bit about what you think the biggest benefit has been to the partnership with Osaki City, you know, for the citizens of your community?
Well, there's so many, I don't think we've got time, but I will tell you just a couple of examples. Emily Hatchett, a young lady that attended she was actually one of the exchange students back in, I don't know what year, but it was a while back. When she got her education at Mercer, she went to Japan and taught Japanese for 2 years almost. There's been so many friendships made that still remain friendships. But the biggest thing is just a cultural exchange and helping us to understand more. When you have Japanese students and adults coming and staying in your home and talking and visiting for 10 days or even less, it's good to learn about each other's culture, and it makes us closer and more productive as citizens.
That's a wonderful comment. Thank you so much. All right, we're going to move on now to Yokosawa-san. Can you please share a bit about your personal connections to the Tohoku region?
Sure, Jessica, thank you. Okay, so I was born in Tokyo, but my family moved to Iwate, Morioka in Iwate when I was about 2 years old because of my father's business. My father is from Iwate. So, you know, I spent 16 years between age 2 to age 18 in Morioka. And my parents still live in Iwate, and my second brother lives in Iwate, and my third brother lives in Fukushima. So I have a personally very deep connection to Tohoku area.
Great. So that, everything that happened then during the earthquake, of course,
Yeah.
affected you very personally and your family. I'm sure that was a difficult time for you. Can you please tell us a little bit about what Delta Airlines has been doing and what you've been doing personally? We know that Delta was a huge supporter of the various relief and rebuilding efforts.
Sure.
And that there were a lot of exchange programs going on, et cetera. Can you please tell us about that?
Absolutely, yeah. So it'll be mostly my personal story. When the earthquake and tsunami happened on March 11th, back in 2011, I was on a flight from Atlanta to Buenos Aires in Argentina, actually. So when the plane landed, I had a BlackBerry that time, just like you did. So I started receiving lots of emails from my colleagues and friends asking how my family was doing back in Japan, because I had no idea, because I was on a flight to Buenos Aires, and I didn't have access to internet on the flight, so I really didn't know what's going on. So, but I found when the aircraft touched down and going to the gate, I found that the earthquake hit the eastern part of Japan and the tsunami hit Japan. So, I went to the baggage claim area, and there was a TV showing the CNN program. So I just freaked out, because, I saw the video of, tsunami hitting one city after another. And those are the places that I really know very well. So I sent a text to my, father, brother, called them, but nothing worked out. No lines are working. And, I was unfortunately 11,000 miles away from my hometown. So, I was supposed to continue on to Iguas and then to Manaus, total 5 days, but I canceled my whole trip. But, there was no flight coming back from Buenos Aires to Atlanta until midnight. So I was just sitting at the airport, just watching TV. And about 3 hours later, my brother sent me a very short text. He said, they were hit by the earthquake, magnitude 9, but everybody was alive. What a relieving message that I received. So I flew back to Atlanta, and I started working at headquarters. And it was a little mess, because Delta canceled all the flights for next 2 weeks. And there are lots of people stranded in Tokyo or stranded in the US trying to fly back. So, I worked very hard to, get the operation back in line. But it took a few weeks to be back, I think later in April, I flew back to Japan. I did a fundraising at the Delta campus in mid-March. And my colleagues donated more than $3,000. And also I asked my colleagues to donate dry batteries, because the batteries were running out in Japan, because everyone was trying to get them. So I got a suitcase full of batteries which were donated from my colleagues. So I flew back to Japan in April, rented a car, and I had a suitcase full of battery. And I kept dropping them at the different city offices in the government offices in Iwate. So that was my first trip after the earthquake. And I did 3 projects after the earthquake. And Yoshi can probably share the presentation slide. So Delta's mission is bringing people together and making the world a smaller place. So what I try to do was, there are lots of people in the United States who are trying to volunteer and help people in Tohoku to recover. So the first trip I made was back in September 2011. I worked with one of the Japanese travel agencies, and they created a tour package for the volunteers. So they gathered about 20 volunteers throughout the United States. Some people are from New York, I got some people from Denver, Colorado, Texas, and California. So people came from all over the US, and there are about 20 volunteers. And I couldn't stop but joining myself. So I also paid for the package tour and joined the group. And we flew to Tokyo, and then we took a bus to go to Sendai. And we spent 5 days going back and forth in between Sendai and Ishinomaki. And we helped one of the fish cannery factories. We are actually supposed to be there for 3 days and do other things 2 days in Tokyo. But all those volunteers say, we don't have to do anything but help people in Tohoku. So we canceled all the things in Tokyo and just spent entire 5 days, just cleaning the factory in Ishinomaki. So that was our first trip. And then next year in 2012, there was a person in New York organizing the gospel choir group. And they say, he said that he wanted to bring this group of gospel singers to Tohoku area because these singers went through the hardship with 9/11. And these people are mainly from Harlem area, which is kind of less privileged, neighborhood. So those people are, these young singers who are trying to, bring their songs to people in Tohoku. So I spoke with somebody at the Delta's Community Affairs Department and see, if Delta was willing to bring this wonderful group of people to Tohoku. So Delta, supported the flights of all these volunteers, all those singers. So we flew to Tokyo again. So, we took a shuttle bus and went to, the coastal area in Iwate and Miyagi. And we had the 3 concerts at the different temples, mainly. It was so cold. And, I didn't expect so many people to come because it was really cold. And I wasn't sure if people are interested. But all 3 venues were completely full. Lots of old people, elderly people, and they came, listened to the songs, and they are all in tears. So it was really surprising to see, to connect, those elderly people in Tohoku with these singers from Harlem. I never thought about, connecting these people. And my last trip was with, as Councilor General mentioned, it was with Bobby Valentine. He's of course a very well-known baseball figure. And in Japan, he's almost a legend because, he came from the United States, led the Chiba Marines and to the national championship. And, Bobby has a lot to do with Japan, and he's very much well connected with the community in Japan. So somebody who knows Bobby came to me and asked if Delta was interested in taking his baseball team in Connecticut to Ofinato. Ofinato is a town in Japan, which is very famous for baseball player Otani, who plays for Los Angeles, the Angels right now. So Bobby was taking his entire baseball team to Ofinato. So once again, I spoke with this person at the Community Affairs and to see if Delta was willing to support this project, and the answer was yes. So that we traveled to Japan again and traveled to Iwate and spent about 7 days. Half day doing volunteer work, and half day playing baseball with local teams. So those baseball players from the US and Ofinato, they got really well connected. So 2 years later, I don't have a picture, but back in 2016, those baseball players from Ofinato actually went to Connecticut and play baseball games too. So, I was really happy to see that, to see the connection of, young baseball players in between Connecticut and Ofinato, and they keep their friendship, forever. So I think, I had a privilege to work on these different projects, and I was really happy that the Delta supported, these events. So lastly, I'd like to thank everybody, who is participating to this program. It's been 10 years from the earthquake and tsunami. But I went back to Iwate last year, back in June, and I drove through the coastal cities, and they are still trying to recover, even though they have lots of new laws and the infrastructure is getting much better. But there are so many like aftershocks, the very strong ones, and it'll take another 20 to 30 years, for example, for the nuclear plant in Fukushima to be clean. So I think this is going to be a long-term project, for recovery. So I really appreciate everybody, having attention and participate to an event like this. So thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Yokosawa-san. Those were some just incredible stories. I especially what I liked about hearing the stories about the baseball exchange in Harlem is it really emphasizes the importance of also really building those connections and friendships. As I had mentioned before, it's really not just about rebuilding the buildings. Eventually the buildings and the roads will be rebuilt, but taking care of people's need to connect with other people as well. So that was incredible. You also had mentioned about the aftershocks too. I'm not sure how many people in the audience know, Consul General mentioned it, the very large aftershocks just recently. Yeah. And in fact, the way that I found out about that was from our friends in Osaki City, who texted me, right after it happened, and they were talking about how having an aftershock like that, it was the biggest earthquake they'd experienced since March 11th. And they said nobody was injured, but like psychologically, it just brought everybody right back into that moment. And they said it was terrifying from that point of view. So I think what you're talking about really talks about how important it is to be taking care of people's, well-being from an emotional standpoint as well, which is something I think the community building can help with.
Yeah. It was actually magnitude 7, so it's pretty scary.
Yeah, absolutely. I can't even imagine. I really can't imagine what that would be like, and to experience it more than once. I know. It must have been terrible. All right. Well, thank you very much, Yokosawa-san. And now I'd like to bring things over to Trevor of Global Atlanta. So we understand you were in Japan right before March 11th, 10 years ago, and would like, first of all, to talk about your experiences in Japan, but also sort of from like a media standpoint in the immediate aftermath, covering that disaster, and any commentary you can give on that topic would be great.
Sure, thanks, Jessica, and thank y'all for having me to reflect on this. This is really an important topic to continue discussing. Like, it made me very sad to hear you say, Jessica, that when in the aftermath you got all these calls, but then as of 2 or 3 years after, the interest had faded away from the media, and that's really what we hope at Global Atlanta doesn't happen when we have these important relationships over time with various countries that are investing so heavily in Georgia and have such a strong connection to our state. So I had been tracking even before 2011, started at Global Atlanta in 2007, have been tracking a lot of investment activity from Japan into Georgia. And then it was obviously built up, thanks to, YKK's pioneering investments in the 70s and companies like Murata and others. It had obviously built up to a point where it was already a substantial contributor to Georgia's economy in the tens of thousands of jobs. And so when I had the opportunity through actually Yokosawa-san, a sponsorship from Delta Airlines of Global Atlanta, I had the opportunity to go to Japan. My task was to look at how Japanese investors have impacted the state, and vice versa, how American companies, particularly those from Georgia, had contributed to Japan's economy. And so, of course, I was seeking out the usual suspects like Coca-Cola and Aflac and many of our Georgia-based companies that were operating there, but also got to visit companies like Mitsubishi Electric and Yokohama and some others. But mostly my trip was concentrated in Tokyo and the surrounding area there. So I was not up in Tohoku region at that time. But what that did in that January trip, it gave me a personal connection to the place, right? I was one of those people calling you as soon as I heard the news. And, you know, I was looking just a moment ago at my story that I actually published on March 11th. I mean, because I had those connections in place from the trip. I basically used the same people that I spoke with on my reporting trip as sources for reactions to the event itself. And to me that, you know, for one, just from a pure media standpoint, showed the importance of just personal connection, paying attention, just having those invested relationships with your sources for one, but also, you know, made it very personal for me, like I said. So luckily everyone I spoke to was okay, but of course most of those people again were in Tokyo and in areas that were not immediately impacted. So, you know, since the earthquake, I've had this interest in learning how countries recover from disaster, and I was able to, you know, partly because of that experience of being there so soon before, and had the opportunity a year after that to go to Haiti and see how they were recovering. So my follow-up trip in 2019 was very poignant to me, being able to go back and actually see how Ishinomaki was recovering. But we can get into that as well. But I think the thing that struck me in the initial phase, we actually did a Japan special report that was already planned, you know, based on my trip, but the report completely changed from, you know, a pure detached view of Georgia investment in Japan to a very humanitarian almost look at how business and personal relationships are interwoven, right? And how you can't really divorce the two. And so struck me as very interesting how quickly the Georgia-based companies in particular were reaching out to their local workforce, their local staff on the ground, announcing contributions even before the dust had really settled. Yeah, I'm looking back on some of the stories. I mean, Aflac within a day, and of course I'm from Columbus, Georgia, so that was you know, impactful for me to see Aflac investing. But within a day, they had already committed $1 million to the relief effort, and they were evaluating whether their CEO at the time should be on the ground there or not. And of course, they had the Cisco telepresence system in their office, and he was still talking about traveling because with 5,000 people on the ground, he knew how important it would be for them to physically see him there if he was not going to be a nuisance. And I think they ended up deciding against the initial trip, but soon after traveled back. But it was just, to me, it was illustrative of how, again, how these investment relationships translate into personal ties and friendships that are lasting, like Mayor Best was mentioning.
Great. Thank you so much. And then, of course, you, as you referenced, you had the opportunity to go back in 2019 as part of the Gen J program, and were able to go up to the Tohoku region in that area. And of course, Mayor Best was on that trip as well. But starting with you, Trevor, and then I'd like to have Mayor Best weigh in as well too. But what was that experience like? You know, of course, we already had the strong ties between Dublin and Osaki, but you also had the opportunity to tour, you know, outside that region as well. So tell us what you saw.
Yeah, I think one way to think about it is looking through the lens of some of the folks we spoke with. So I think you connected us, Jessica, with the Ishinomaki City Community and Information Center, which is run by a British guy actually named Richard Halberstadt. And Richard had his own firsthand experiences being there and his own choice whether to stay, you know, and try to help recover or actually go back to the UK, and he ended up choosing to stay. But you know, he some of the things that struck me about that visit, I vividly remember him talking about the placement of the photos in the recovery center. Of course, they had a lot of models of how the city was going to be rebuilding, and at that time, they were planning the creation of a park that was in the low-lying area close to the sea. That was going to be a memorial park, but of course that was the site where most of the casualties had occurred because people could not get from the lower ground up to the higher ground. Even though there were strong preparations in place, disaster preparations in place, and warning systems and alarms, in the heat of the moment, it was not that easy for people to get out. People the roads got clogged and things like that. And so I remembered, one thing that he mentioned, that there's a park that's kind of up above the city, a sort of hillside park. And he said the people that got there had the calamitously unfortunate experience of watching everything happen before their eyes. And speaking of, the mental and emotional toll that's going to take on people, I can imagine they'll never fully recover from that. And he also talked about how a tsunami actually works, and the fact that it's not what you see in the movies where it sweeps everything at once. It's a very slow, kind of sinister crawl of the water, towards you. And it does pick up steam and pick up debris at the same time. But imagining those people watching that destruction happen before their eyes really got to me. And I remember him saying that in the center, it's a small, unassuming building in the middle of town. And when you look through from the outside, you can see in because there are windows. And he said they had to put the photos of the destruction both in binders and behind a second wall, because to avoid triggering post-traumatic stress from people who'd be walking by. And to me, again, that was just very impactful and showed that this is going to be a long haul in terms of recovery. But I'll tee up Mayor Best, I think, on a happier note. I will say that as a reporter, we're always skeptical of everything, and sister cities are one of those things that can either be really helpful or just kind of in name only sometimes. And I certainly had my degree of skepticism about the relationship between Dublin and Osaki, but once I was on the ground there, Mayor Best and I were able to visit a factory there, the YKK AP factory, meet both the mayor who had signed the sister city relationship and the current mayor of Osaki, and a lot of YKK officials as well. And it was, and not only them, but members of the local, the Osaki International Committee who had traveled to Dublin on exchanges in the past, who hosted us and actually took time out of their schedule to take us around the region, not only to their city, but down to Ishinomaki and over to Senshu University, which you'll talk about, I'm sure, Jessica, with Taylor Anderson's reading sites. But there was a real warmth, and you could tell those 175 exchange programs had really done their work of knitting people together. And like Mayor Best said, when people come together in crisis, it certainly bonds them for the long haul. So.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you so much. That's really moving to hear about that. Mayor Best, do you want to weigh in a little bit on what your trip was like back there in 2019? And I'll also say to the audience here, if you have any questions also for our panelists, please go ahead and put them in the chat. And we may have a minute or two to answer those. But Mayor Best? I think you're on mute. You're on mute.
That's better. From the Tokyo trip, region trip, Trevor did a great job of explaining our tour. And but one of the things that really hit home with me was meeting with the educators that had taught with and worked with Taylor Anderson, a young lady that was, well, I think y'all are going to talk about it a little bit. But those folks were just, they wanted to memorialize her and just, I think she really made an impact on them, and I'm sure they did her too. But that was probably one of the things that all brought it home to me. As far as the rest of the trip, I think, just the camaraderie of the members of the YKK group and the sister city, and it's just, it's a friendship like you go 4 or 5 years without seeing some of your friends, and those that are your friends, you just immediately bond again, and it's all automatic. That's the way this is, and that was created over a period of time. It was just a really good trip, and I'm glad Trevor was on it with us. I think we traveled really well together and enjoyed seeing these things together.
Yeah, I do have to mention the name of Mr. Jin Ito, who is the head of the International Committee in Osaki City. And I've kind of lost count, but I think he has been to Dublin nearly every trip since the beginning of the relationship. And this is every 2 years. He comes, and then he's the one who coordinates everything on the Japan side for every trip. And for those of you watching who don't know what goes into planning, some of these trips where you've got a bunch of high school kids you're trying to corral and keep in line, Ito-san just puts a tremendous amount of work into that, and it's completely volunteer. And this, I will say exactly the same thing, Mayor Best, for the Dublin International Committee as well. I mean, they are just the core of keeping that relationship going to completely volunteer also, which is just tremendous. So we have the, of course, the corporate support, where we just try to make sure everybody is all, talking to each other and all in line, but it's really those volunteers that make all of that happen too. And I think that's one of the best things, about those relationships.
He's an icon.
Yeah.
Ito-san was the consummate host for sure.
And when he would come to America, the adults in the group of the International Committee here would actually be fighting over who Ito got to stay with. They wanted him there. But there's one other thing I'd like to mention, if I have time, is about the opportunity we had while we were there. Trevor and I did not know this was going to be part of the trip, but in the process, somewhere along the way, and Jessica, I think you helped us arrange this, but
yes,
one of our past employees of YKK here in Dublin that had come to do the startup of the plant here in Dublin, who had a great relationship with our former mayor, Bob Walker. Ironically, he passed away while we were over there. We got to go to his house and visit with his daughter and his his wife. And I will tell you, I would not take $1 million for that. He, as we were talking before we went on the air, when we went into the home and they had the body there in the house, they had a framed proclamation that had made him an honorary citizen that Bob Walker had given him in 1990 something, 98, 99, and they had that displayed by his casket, and it was just I was fortunate to be the mayor and to be there at that time. It was just an indescribable feeling.
Mm-hmm.
It's always hard to talk after that story. I'm going to start to tear up. That was just an incredible story. Thank you. I think we will go on to the next part of the program, where I'd like to tell you a bit about Taylor Anderson, who you have heard referenced a couple of times. So Taylor was the first confirmed American casualty of March 11th. And she was part of the JET program we mentioned a couple of times. For those that don't know, the JET stands for Japan Exchange and Teaching Program. It's a program sponsored by the Japanese government to send basically recent college graduates from all over the world to spend 1 to 5 years in Japan teaching English and doing other international exchange activities. And prior to the earthquake, Taylor had spent 2.5 years teaching English to students all over Ishinomaki City in Miyagi. And of course, so Ishinomaki was one of the cities that was the most hard hit. And, unfortunately, she was last seen helping and assuring her students after the disaster. So after the earthquake hit, she was the one helping the students, get out of the building and evacuate. And Taylor's real passion and love for the people of Japan is actually carried on through the Taylor Anderson Memorial Fund, which amazingly was established the week of March 21st, 2011, so nearly immediately after the earthquake. And the main purpose of the fund is to help students, schools, and families in the Ishinomaki area recover from the earthquake and the tsunami. And it's done in a way that Taylor's family, who helped to establish the fund, that they think that Taylor would wanted it to have been done. It was always her dream to be a bridge between Japan and the US. And, in many ways that dream is actually being realized through the efforts of this organization. So Yoshi, I think we have a video. And with that, I would like to turn it over to Al Hodge, the chair of the Japan America Society of Georgia. Al, I challenge you to be able to talk without a tear in your eye after watching that.
It is a gripping scene, and to think about the casualties and the losses, while at the same time, this legacy, this living legacy to honor her, and of course, everyone who is so supportive, really are to be commended. And yes, it is difficult to get through this hand over heart and truly, literally choking. The Japan America Society of Georgia, then and now, of course, are so supportive of the folks in the whole region that were impacted and continue to be, as has been described today and in other ways, to commemorate and memorialize the folks that have lost and those that have suffered losses. We are truly, we've always been with our Japanese friends, and this is one way to reassure that we will always be there in spirit, physically, and in other ways. I've been asked to share a couple of upcoming events related to the Japan American Society of Georgia, one of which is the Feminism, Diversity, and Inclusion webinar, which is next Thursday, March 18th at 6:00 p.m. Eastern Time. Another one on US and Japanese geopolitics and geostrategy. That's a webinar on March 25th at 7. And of course, some of these we do with our friends at the National Association of Japan America societies. Well, in a way, to show support for the folks that were impacted by the earthquake and the tsunami, the Japan America Society of Georgia once again came together with the Japan Chamber of Commerce of Georgia, the Consul General of Georgia, and Japan Fest, and the board and the committees of all of these organizations, and held a number of fundraising events, film screenings, concerts, workshops about art and culture. A relief fund was established, and Yoshi Domoto has shared that $350,000 was raised for the Nippon Foundation, Doctors Without Borders, the Japanese Red Cross, and other community organizations in Japan. And therefore, a lot of heart, a lot of soul, and financial and other commitments were and continue to be made. Let us never, ever forget. And Jessica, you mentioned earlier about the resilience of our Japanese friends and their internal fortitude in order to get through this and to have a brighter day ahead. And part of what all of this commemoration is about hope for our Japanese friends, hope for the whole region in every way. And it is so heartening that the business community, colleges and universities, associations, the JASG Tomodachi Club, so many different ways that folks from here have shown support. And I love the story about the 1,000 cranes from the elementary students. Thank you, YKK. Thank you, Mayor Best and the people of Dublin to instill that thought process for the elementary students of Dublin, and as a way to show love and support for the children in Japan, as well as, of course, it's so touching for all of us, Well, when Yoshi Domoto and the others asked for if anyone would want to submit a way to say, we're with you and we share your hope for the future, we were actually overwhelmed. We had 112 videos from people across Georgia, from all ages, lots of communities that submitted. And therefore, we're going to show all of those in time. What we have today is to share some of the ones that we were able to put together. Thank you, Yoshi, and thank you, Art Arredondo, who always comes through for our technology and videos, and we appreciate all of that. And so with our friends at JETRO, the Japan Chamber of Commerce of Georgia, the Consul General, on behalf of everyone at the Japan America Society of Georgia, we say we are with you, and we mean it, and we will continue to be with you, and we share your hope, your love, and our relationships for the future. On behalf of Japan America Society of Georgia and the sister cities throughout our state, 10 years ago, we mourned the loss of Japanese people with the tsunami and the earthquake. We were so impressed with the resilience of the Japanese people and look forward to a happier time ahead.
忘れません. We remember.
Hi, I'm Dan Amos, Chairman and CEO of AFLAC. On this solemn day, we remember the devastating tsunami that struck the coast of Japan 10 years ago. We remember the loss and hold their families close to our hearts. From Georgia to our offices in Japan and the entire Tohoku region, we honor their memories and celebrate the bonds that unite our company and our two great nations.
Konnichiwa. My name is Vanessa Ibarra, and I'm the Director for the Mayor's Office of International Affairs for the City of Atlanta. On behalf of our Mayor, Keisha Lance Bottoms, it is my pleasure to join the Japan-America Society of Georgia, colleagues and friends, in commemorating the 10-year anniversary of the Great East Japan earthquake and tsunami. 10 years on, we remember and honor all who were affected. I would like to thank the Japan-America Society of Georgia for organizing today's Remembrance Day ceremony. Please allow me to recognize the Honorable Consul General Kazuyuki Takeuchi for enduring support in advancing Japan-Atlanta relations. Arigato gozaimashita. Thank you.
Minasan konnichiwa. My name is Robert Johnson, Chairman of the International Charter Academy of Georgia. On behalf of the nearly 200 students at the school, today we remember the tragic loss experienced by so many in connection with the Fukushima disaster 10 years ago. At the same time, we pay tribute to the great love, the selfless compassion demonstrated by the tens of thousands who came to the aid of those suffering. In Japanese, there's a word that I would teach our students, omoi yari. Omoi, to think, to feel the pain of others. Yari, to do, to give, to undertake. And so we pay tribute, we remember and honor the great loss and the love. Omoyari wasuremasen.
Times like these are when love is needed the most, so my heart goes out to all of them. Japan, all the way from Georgia, you are on my mind. We will never forget.
We remember. Wasuremasen.
On behalf of the Georgia-Japan Legislative Caucus, we remember and continue to value the important relationship between Georgia and Japan.
Greetings, my name is Ryan Waldrop with the Dublin-Lawrence County Development Authority. On behalf of the residents of Dublin and Lawrence County, Georgia, our collective thoughts are with the people of our sister city, Osaki, as we remember the events of March 11.
From the many Georgia communities that focus on Japan and U.S.-Japan friendship, we extend our thoughts and prayers to our Japanese friends, family, and colleagues on the 10th anniversary of March 11, 2011.
Hello, I'm Stan Hall, Chief Operating Officer of the Infinite Energy Center and Explore Gwinnett. As one of the many Georgia communities that focus on Japan and U.S.-Japan friendships, we extend our thoughts and prayers to our Japanese friends, families, and colleagues on the 10th anniversary of March the 11th, 2011. As we reflect on the anniversary of this tragic event, we are reminded of the great courage and the great resiliency that has always been a strong trait of the Japanese people. We cherish our relationships, both professional and personal, with our wonderful friends in Japan.
Hello, my name is Julie Strecker, and I would like to say on behalf of Mercer University and Mercer University International Programs in Atlanta, Georgia, that our hearts are with you today. We remember.
One of the first words I learned when I first visited Japan 30 years ago was tomodachi, friendship. In the 3 decades since, the people of Japan have showed me the true meaning of friendship in more ways than I can count. In 2016, I accompanied a group of high school students from Dublin, Georgia, to their sister city of Osaki-shi in Miyagi-ken, and we had the opportunity to tour the areas that were devastated by the earthquake and tsunami. What was most memorable about that trip was not witnessing the level of destruction, although that was sobering. What truly made an impression on us was the Japanese people's strength, hope, eagerness to share their story, and desire to build lasting friendships with people all over the world. Our friends in Japan have taught us an incredible lesson in resilience, and the people of Georgia stand ready to assist in any way that we can along your journey of resurrection.